This is a one-night stewardship workshop for how to use the summer well to get ready for annual pledges in the fall. Everybody's at the right meeting? There you go.
Hi, Father Bob.
Hi, Megan. Hi, Megan. We'll start with a prayer.
I'll start with a prayer.
That'd be lovely.
The Lord be with you.
And also
with you.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, you made us in your image and breathed in us a spirit of generosity that is both gift and response. Move us, we pray, to give as we have received, abundantly, generously, and joyfully, that our common ministry may ever bear witness to your unfailing grace. And so we pray with grateful hearts in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
So good evening, everybody. We'll wait for the slides to start up. Here we are. Jamie, if you could move us to the agenda. So here is this evening's program. Oh, back one, thank you. And we will begin with very brief introductions and an opening poll just to get to know each other a little bit. And then address that question, why stewardship? Why is this an important thing for us to be doing on a beautiful early summer evening? We'll talk about promoting year-round stewardship. It's not just a project for the fall. And we'll especially focus on using the summer to prepare for success as you enter your stewardship campaign later in the year. We will dig into the available resources that we have for you, and we'll end up with breakout groups. And I think there are enough of us today that will be divided into rooms. Some clever person will do that for us, so we can share the challenges and the successes that we've had. Next slide, Jamie. And so what is Project Resource? Well, if you don't know already, we are the Stewardship Commission of the Diocese of New Jersey. And we share with you the spiritual, practical, and effective tools that help us express thanks for God's generosity and to fund the mission and ministry of God's church. And here are all these friendly faces. As you can see, they are clergy and lay people from around the diocese. And we are also ably supported by members of the CCS fundraising team of consultants who assist the diocese. We are always looking for new members. So if you feel intrigued and inspired, please get in touch with Father Bob or with Ava Lesniak. Okay.
So let's get to know who else is on the call with a poll. So it'll appear on your screen, and if you can answer some of those questions, we'll get a sense of how we're composed across this evening's attendees.
Can you see that poll, Eva?
I can. I'm trying to figure out how I answer it. I think it's...
Okay.
Oh, I see. The bar at the bottom. Got it. On the right-hand side.
Yeah, there are 4 questions, so make sure you scroll down and answer all 4.
Okay, so we're about 80% of us have finished the poll. Let's just give another minute or two, another couple seconds, and then we'll take a look at the results. Okay. Almost all of us. So it looks like we have maybe a fifth of us are stewardship chair, a fifth of us are members of the stewardship team, a fifth of us are pastors, fifth of us are wardens, and the rest are vestry members, including treasurers, several treasurers. So that's a nice representation across our congregations. And then how long have you been involved in stewardship activities? So we have some very new people to it. About 10 of us this is our first year. A few have not been involved at all. And then we have others that are veterans in this effort. So it's really nice to see so much representation across the levels of experience. Looks like we have a few small congregations. Many are 50 to 100 members, and then a few larger congregations, about 15. And then finally, it looks like maybe half of us have attended the August stewardship sessions that we held last summer. So welcome back. But we have a number of individuals that haven't. So that's really great. Any other things that people want to share about what you've noticed with the results of the stewardship poll, the poll we just ran? Okay. I think we can move on. Thank you.
Before we move to the next slide, if there's anyone here who is new to stewardship, a new stewardship chair role, or very new to stewardship, would love for you to identify yourselves in the chat. You could indicate your name and church. It's for future activities we're going to be doing. So if anyone here is new to stewardship, this is your first year serving as a stewardship chair, or first year involved in stewardship at your church, if you could please let us know in the chat, that would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you for remembering to ask that, Jamie. Father Bob?
So why stewardship? Some people can be tempted to answer, well, we have to do a stewardship campaign because we have to get the money in. And that is a factually true statement. But the premise is that it is much bigger and actually more important than that. Stewardship is admitting that everything we have is from God, and that we are committing ourselves and our possessions to God's service. As the people of God, we are taking care of, growing, and passing on what's been entrusted to us by God, and to some extent by our ancestors as well. We can give thanks, we can tend to what's been entrusted to us, and most of all, stewardship is about mirroring God's generosity. How can we take part in God's mission? By giving him thanks and reflecting his generosity to us. The simple act of learning to look for and recognize and name God's generosity in our lives and in our congregations and in the world really is the foundation of a good stewardship program, a good stewardship team, and a good stewardship season. Thank you. This one's me too, isn't it? Okay. Our annual giving, that is the pledges, apart from a capital campaign, apart from any wills, annual giving, the annual pledges should be regular, given on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, ideally. A few people may choose to do quarterly or write the one check a year, but having it be an exercise in weekly and monthly life has spiritual benefits too. It should be individual, that each of us makes these decisions. And those of us, whether we're clergy or lay leaders, recognize that every pledge card, every piece of loose offering or in-kind donation is actually a spiritual decision by somebody. and it bears great respect, and it deserves our thanks. It should be planned. That is, it's put aside. Spiritually healthy giving is from first fruits. We give to God first from the totality of all that we have. And we don't give to God in the church out of our excess or out of our leftovers. Anything else, if it's when we give from our leftovers, we're living in a sense of scarcity rather than a sense of God's abundance. So assess yourself in your own prayers and relationship with God, and encourage that in the people around you, that this is from first fruits. This is planned, that we give to God from our substance, not our leftovers. And it should be in proportion to our income. And we can say more about that another time, but what is the average pledge? We may never know the average income, or certainly any individual income, but you can look at pledges and know how does the average pledge size in your congregation compare to the average income of your area. Now, your congregation may not be exactly in line with your average local income, but if you see numbers that are below 1%, 2%, you have a stewardship challenge. You have a spiritual challenge as well as a financial one. God calls for tithing. The Episcopal Church calls for tithing, 10%. And if you're at 0 or point something or 1%, that could explain some of the tension and friction you feel around resources, because you've got a spiritual question there too. Thank you. I don't think this one is me.
This is Natalie.
Hello, everybody. I'm Natalie Krauser. I am the Stewardship Chair at All Saints Episcopal in Scotch Plains, also a member of the vestry, and I love year-round stewardship. Before anybody gets frightened by that, Eva's laughing because I talk about it all the time. You shared a little bit in the polls earlier about who you are and where you are. So feel free, I'll sort of zoom around Zoom. If you want to raise your hand or do a reaction, do you have year-round stewardship right now? And year-round is going to be nearly anything additional to the 4 to 6 week process in the fall leading up to your campaign. So do you do a spring breakfast? Do you do an impact update? Do you bring people together to write thank you notes? Don't be shy. Anyone? Anybody? Raise your hand. Nobody? Tina's just laughing at me. Oh my gosh. I see Nayla raising her hand.
I don't know if the answer is yes or no. And I think that's the problem.
Oh, well, first off, thank you for raising your hand. Thank you for stepping up. And you know what? There might be other people who feel the same way. So if you're uncertain, what brings you to that uncertain point? And do you want to share a little bit about what you're doing right now?
I think that we may have things that are happening that would fall under the category of stewardship at other times of the year, but I'm not necessarily aware that they're happening or that they're connected to stewardship specifically. Now that I'm actually participating in the committee, I'm starting to draw, connections. But if I was just still warming the choir loft or warming a pew, I wouldn't know.
Well, and that's actually very fair and valid too, because we can tell you what it should look like or what we see people doing and what ties to stewardship. But as you pointed out, rightfully so, if you're there attending church and you're not entirely certain that it looks like stewardship and it feels like stewardship, maybe it isn't stewardship. And I really actually appreciate that, because these just sort of start to be examples of things that you could do. However, there's about a 50-50 split tonight between those who came last year to our 4-week session and those who are here too. So it seems as though we might have some questions along that line anyway. And I see a hand raised, and I will take that because I want to hear what you have to say about this. But stewardship, right, is an active, continual engagement where you are taking care of and then showing that care to someone else to involve them. So that encompasses a lot. And I see a hand raised.
Yeah, we do quarterly statements. We talk about stewardship every vestry meeting. We in children's sermons, I bring it up with the kids, just mostly to get them to understand that they are part of the church and that they're, that this is their church and they have responsibilities, like acolyting and other things like that. We do bring it up with new members when we have new members. Often our new members we've gained a lot of new membership recently, and almost every single one of them have asked for envelopes. We've run out of envelopes, so we have to order more next year, which is a nice problem to have.
So we actually, Jamie, we need to write this down because we need Reverend Bradley to like come back on board and be another example and show sort of a best case scenario in the future. I mean, so I heard a couple of things and some of them are here. So if we were playing bingo, and I do love a good bingo board, this sort of reminds me of it. I heard with new members, right? To the point that they're actually actively, intentionally going and saying, how do I give financially? So ding, 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 during sermons, in children messaging. And for anyone who doesn't know, I do have 2 children. I have a 7th grader and a 1st grader. I have an acolyte and a Sunday school attendee, and they are very actively involved to the point that my youngest one actually drew pictures on the boring envelope to make it more kid friendly, and now goes around to her class and says, who has $1? Put it in my envelope. That's, when you're able to move that along, you love to do that. And then I heard at vestry meetings. So, I mean, like you cleared the bingo card just off the top in one example. And so then I want to go back to Nyla, and correct me if I'm saying your name wrong. When you were like, oh, when I'm in the pew, Nayla, when you were in the pew, did these things happen? And did it feel like stewardship to you? And now that you're in this volunteer role, any of the things that the Reverend just talked about that sound like something you're familiar with, or could be something that you would want to bring into play?
I feel like I'm about to show that I have not listened as well as I should have, but to the
okay.
sermons.
None of us listen as well as we should have. Don't even worry.
But outside of the stewardship season, I haven't really noticed much of anything that could be that falls into the category of talking about giving financially. So we've had some fundraisers, but those were more like an activity to go do. So,
okay. Well, and in some cases, so full disclosure, I am a fundraiser, right? Like that actually is my professional day job. Mm-hmm. And I would say, I don't really want to hear anybody talk about dollars 365 days a year. I want to make certain that you're tapping into those in your parish who do have time, talent, and treasure. But time and talent is a lot of the times that precursor, right? So if you're sharing with a new member, what happens in your church? What are your ministries? Connect them to somebody, during coffee hour. See, we're going to roll around our stewardship plan. Those things, you are actively stewarding them and engaging them so that then they have that chance to reach out and say, I want to give a gift. I would say the one things I heard, so we heard 4 things. She cleared the bingo card at the top. There's a discussion with new members. It's brought up stewardship of like your gift does X, Y, and Z. And I would say you want to rotate through those volunteers. So if someone talks about the time they might give to like paint a Sunday school classroom, as well as the time they do to collect food and donate and deliver it to a food pantry, just as much as I've made my gift and I'm giving it every single week. I see Brenda has also raised her hand.
Unmute myself. There we go. I find our biggest problem is just trying to get people back into the building. We still are doing we are doing, our online, and there are many families that have not returned. We believe they are watching online, and that I think is one of our biggest problems. Coffee hour, we reinstated coffee hour, but again, it's minimally people coming.
Okay. And may I ask you, I want to say you responded, are you in Metuchen?
Yes.
Okay. I thought I had seen you in the chat. So I know that St. Luke's, I live in Westfield. I used to drive by you when I worked in Piscataway. So it's an interesting conundrum. Then we're going to get to Bob. I see his hand raised. When we were with St. James and St. Michael's a couple of weeks ago, that's actually where we sort of ended back up, because we learned through Ken and Ursaya that a lot of their parishioners had not come back into the building. And so then it is, I mean, sort of twofold. So like, if we're going to get into the transaction part, I want to ask you, not to make it all about money, but some days it's about money. Do you offer online giving? Is there a vehicle that lets even those at home to give? Okay, so yes. And have you seen consistency in there? Is that something that, you know, is offsetting or supporting your budget in the way that you're expecting? Or is that also below expectations?
I don't know if we ever had any expectations of it. Not that many people use it. Now, people will mail a check in.
God bless them. They're so much better than me.
But you know, I think it's more of an issue of not having the bodies back in the building. We've spent the last month and a half working extensively in Friar Hall to just clean it out, update it, get rid of the cobwebs, make it look like a building that people would want to be in.
And as you're doing that, not to cut you off, but I want to make certain we set the stage. As you do that, is this being shared? Is this like an engagement activity that the whole congregation can participate in? Or is it something that maybe just a few or vestry?
Only a few of us can, the two wardens, that's what we do.
Okay.
Our congregation is elderly.
Okay.
And there are very, very few families. And none of our families have returned in person.
So you also said something, and I want to make certain that I heard you correctly and restate it properly. You believe that those individuals who are not back in the building themselves are watching online.
That is what we believe.
And so then that begs the other question. I do love a good piece of data. How are you tracking that, and how are you deploying those services?
Well, see, that's been the question that I have asked many a time to our IT committee, and I have not gotten a clear answer.
Okay, so I just want to sort of put you in the parking lot for a second. I'm going to offer out to you, Brenda. So I live in Westfield. I am not far away. I am more than happy, should you be comfortable, to come and sit and have a chat with you.
Sure.
And we can walk through stuff together, because I also want to get to Bob's question, and then we're going to have a poll so that we can keep on moving forwards. But for anyone who didn't get a question in and wants to, put it in the chat, and Jamie will definitely moderate that for us. Bob.
Yeah, it's not as much of a question, but a comment. And you've hit on a few of those points already. One of it is, I've never in the beginning, and Father, I'm junior warden at Merchantville Grace Church, where Father Bob is. He's my rector there. With that being said, I always tried to push the card of time and talent. We try to focus on program, try to get people involved, because I've always felt that the financial side of that, if people see the value in what they're doing there, and we're hitting their wheelhouse as to want to give and feel spiritual and great about it, the rest of it will come. That's just always been my philosophy with that. And a lot of things that we've done, especially when we had our stewardship drives, usually in the fall, we have a stewardship moment. We'll have any of the wardens or vestry come up and say a little speech about a certain topic of stewardship, whether we focus on time and talent, we focus on the money giving, but also in program. And that's something, I can share with Brenda. We're trying to get people back into the facility and start out with some kind of function, whether it's a parish work day that would help clean up the place, get people there, bring lunch in, be outside, maybe do the grounds first. And, people start warming up to it. People are going to start coming back. It's just my 2 cents on that. So
I really appreciate it. I think you hit on a lot of points. I hope that Brenda's able to sort of put them in a priority that might make sense to her and to her parish. And much like everybody else on this call as well. So I think we're all going to continue to learn from each other. And with that, I know that we do have a poll coming up.
While you guys are completing the poll, I would also just like to add that I had the opportunity to go visit with Canon Yarsiah and his teams from St. James Bradley Beach and St. Michael the Archangel in Wall, where this, as Natalie mentioned, this came up as a major topic during our discussion, just like it did in this one. So I want to encourage all of us also that as we're looking at these slides and talking about these different aspects of stewardship, that we remember that all of this has to do with people's stewardship as well as financial stewardship. So to be thinking about, like when we had sort of that bingo card that Natalie was, referring to, that, and we're talking about all of these different things we want to implement into a year-round stewardship plan, that we're talking about a year-round plan that includes how are we stewarding our people, as well as how are we stewarding the gifts that they have to give, which, that's really sort of talking about more of a, from the stewardship team's perspective, how's the stewardship team actually engaging in helping understand why aren't people coming back, making those connections and, talking and then seeing opportunities in the responses that we get. So, I just want to encourage everyone to be thinking about that as we're going through every single thing that we're talking about here. These resources are not just for, for stewarding financial gifts, they are for stewarding the people in your congregation as well. And then also just to say really briefly, based on what we're hearing here, as well as what I heard in that particular session when we were in person, I can pretty much assure you that we're going to be looking to put together another workshop like this that solely focuses on these issues that we're bringing up and brings resources and more sharing, more opportunity for us to share. I know Natalie's got a ton of stuff that she does, that she could share stories, so we'll try to create, some time and let you know about that. So thank you.
So I see picnics, I see brunches. Phyllis is amazing. She gives me too much credit. We are always doing stuff. I do enjoy bringing people in when I can, and is not always in the physical building. Sometimes it's outside, as Bob mentioned. Sometimes it's to them directly at home. It looks as though we have a couple of people, almost 3/4, who are going to be actively thinking about what could they roll out during July and August. I'm the first person to say that I grew up not going to church during the summer. I'm Episcopalian, and yet you will find me there at least once this summer as I'm helping host some of these. So it is a good time. It is low key. It can be low effort. Seriously, sometimes all you have to do is put people onto a message and say, hi, we hope to see you. If you want to elevate it, you can survey them and poll them just like we did tonight to say, where are you most comfortable? But I think part of it is just continuing to give people the opportunity and make certain that part of that is giving them a chance to be heard, saying that you would like to ask them this question and you're hoping them coming back and you're going to feed them. And with that, I see Mary Elise has a question and I don't think I can take it, but if you put it in the chat, because wow, we have cute visitors. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jamie, who's going to move us back along.
So that was instructive. Thank you very much, Natalie. That was interesting to hear and give everybody sort of a chance to understand what we're going through in our various congregations. But let's address the stages of a stewardship campaign because it's early summer right now, and we're getting ready for the fall. This evening's program is going to focus a good deal on items 1 and 2, defining the goals and planning. You want to be prepared to hit the ground running when your stewardship campaign, what people often refer to as the pledge campaign, begins for most people in the fall, very often in October, and then runs for several weeks and ends perhaps at Thanksgiving, perhaps into Advent. But we want to get you prepped so that you're ready to roll when the time comes. Nevertheless, you will find on this evening's program that we have resources for you to search in and to prepare in advance and really dig into so you're prepared as you reach end of summer, and things you can use now, and then how you can follow up. So this is a time to encourage the members of your stewardship team, to recruit new members, to be inspired by what you hear this evening from other congregations, to get inspired by the materials you'll see we have available to you. Next.
I think that's me. I'm Tina Aiken, and I'm at St. David's in Cranberry. I've been stewardship chair the past several years, and I'm happy to say this year I will have a co-chair, Brigitte Eris, who's also on the meeting tonight, and then she'll be full-time chair starting next year. So I'm just thrilled with that. So we're almost at June, right? I mean, Memorial Day is coming right up, and we'll be into June. So how does the summer look? If you're stewardship chair, what are your first priorities to think about and start planning? One, you may have an ongoing stewardship committee. You may have people from last year who will have already agreed to stay on board, or you may be recruiting fresh this year. And so getting those team members in place, I think, is probably the top June priority. You'll also be talking with your treasurer, whether the treasurer is a formal member of the committee or not, and certainly with your rector, whether the rector is a formal member or not, to begin outlining what the stewardship season could look like. And we're talking about using the summer in this way. We know that not every congregation does their stewardship in the fall. Some do it in winter, some do it in spring, but if you do, you'll be able to work backwards from your stewardship dates and just plug this framework in. So in recruiting volunteers for the stewardship committee, you need a job description, right? People want to know, well, what are you asking me to do? So I think that's, as stewardship chair, you're thinking about that. Maybe that even informs partly who you're asking onto the committee. You might need a writer, designer, communications person. It's already come up, the importance of virtual, right? The importance, whether it's online giving and online pledging, or online small group meetings, or other ways, because COVID brought us into that realm. And while everybody is eager to be back in church and actively trying to engage people to be back in church, some people are still going to be virtual. And so in terms of thinking about it and planning, that has to factor in as well. What's the timeline? Not just the summer timeline, but the timeline for the whole campaign. I think there's going to be a slide a little bit later in the presentation that maps that out in greater detail. So I'm not going to say more about that at this moment. And then you'll start meeting with your committee members, and in that conversation, thinking about, does the campaign have a theme? Why stewardship? What are our goals for this year? And the goals may be increased participation, might be increased number of dollars, but you'll have that conversation with the committee. In July, then time to actually start drafting some of the materials. And again, a bit later in the presentation, kind of map out some of the materials you may want to bring in as part of your campaign. Not necessarily all of them, but you'll start drafting what the letter might look like, what a brochure might look like, posters, how you might engage the children, and are there different kinds of materials that you would need for that. And then, it says announce approaching campaign to the congregation and broader church membership. And that's probably something I would guess most of us don't do in July. We may have some kind of wonderful stewardship activities that are going on. What we probably aren't in July talking about the fall stewardship campaign. But I think that there's opportunity here, and it may be through discussion with, with your priest to say, is there a homily you want to preach during the summer that engages with stewardship in that broad way, that isn't tied to the pledging and the dollars, but is about the gifts, about everything coming from God and what our response to that is. So I would look for ways that you're comfortable with, your committee is comfortable with, your priest is comfortable with, that begins that conversation. And then in August, it's getting more brass tacks, and it's down to getting those materials ready for production or producing them, depending on kind of when exactly in the fall you're kicking off your campaign. So I think with that, Eva, you'll talk to us about recruiting a committee.
Yeah. And so I'd like to just draw your attention to the chat. So Phyllis shared a recommendation that we focus on relationship building, and that might be the goal for the stewardship committee at this point and through the summer, is how do we get people re-engaged in being an active member of your congregation, and that's the stewardship of people, so to speak. And so those might be the goals to take on and to recruit your team now to start working together over the summer. Perhaps it's in a less date-driven way, but more of a holistic view of how to re-engage members of your church, even if they continue to participate online. How do we cater to those different members of our congregation in an effective way so that they feel like they're part of the body of Christ in our particular church? So recruiting our stewardship committee, and I know that some of you identify that you're members of the stewardship committee now, or the stewardship team. Certainly active, great volunteers are also great stewards typically. And so that's an important element, to look for people who are very active in the church, or that used to be active and perhaps need an invitation to re-engage. And so this might be the recruiting process that you take on, might be a way to re-engage previously active volunteers and stewards, lay ministers in your congregation. I think we were going to run a little poll here, weren't we? To see how many members have that are participating have recruited their stewardship committee or their stewardship team for this year. If you can answer that, let's see where we're at. Do you have a stewardship committee recruited for this year yet? Okay, almost all of us have answered now. So I guess it's like 1/3, 2/3, yes? So 1/3 yes, and 2/3 no, not yet. So this might be a good time to start doing that, and to do some relationship mapping and determine who haven't you seen in a while that used to be very active, and how can you re-engage them, and have a team start working together on that. A good starting point might be to talk with the vestry, with the wardens, with the treasurer, with others that are aware of who's being at the different services or involved in lay ministries. All right, I'm going to stop sharing that. Ooh, okay, next slide, please, Jamie. Great. Okay, so who makes a good stewardship committee or stewardship team member? Certainly those that that attend services faithfully, are very spiritually motivated. Those who see stewardship as a way of in their life. Members who volunteer their time with not only the parish but in the community, and are serving the community in some way. Those that have a vision for the church and its future, maybe it's not even 5 or 10 years, but maybe it's just over the next couple of years, but that vision for the future of where the role that the church is going to be playing in members' lives. I like the last column, the qualities for success. And I think that with those types of characteristics, there may be members that don't have a lot of time, and maybe they can just have a very small piece, but very meaningful piece of involvement in a stewardship committee, so that they can't commit to meeting for many, many months. But maybe if you can identify folks that have something that they can share for a short period of time, or even if it's just during one of the services once in a while, I think that giving people a way to share and celebrate their involvement might lead to other things as well. And they may realize that they can spend a little bit more time than they thought they could sharing. So I think this is a nice slide to give you a sense of how to look at members of your congregation. And let's keep in mind also that our congregations are a very diverse mix of longstanding members, maybe new members, families with young children, maybe English speaking, Spanish speaking, those that are online versus in person. So making sure that your stewardship team can represent that diversity in your congregation is very important, and different members may be able to connect and engage with different members of your congregation. So those are important aspects to keep in mind. Next slide, please, Jamie. So how can you recruit potential committee members? And I like the top left one, so inviting them to share their story. That might be a very nice way during the summer to ask people to share either during the service or during coffee hour, but to basically share 2 or 3 minutes about perhaps it's why they come to church or why they're involved in a certain lay ministry, and to celebrate people's involvement in the church and how it is incorporated into their lives. So that might be an entry point into recruiting potential committee members in the fall by having them engage and celebrate in their involvement during the summer months. I've found that it's very helpful to be very specific about what you're asking people to commit to. If it's going to be a bi-weekly or monthly committee meeting, how long will it be? Adhere to your agenda. But it might be more episodic types of engagement where you're looking for people to do specific things to share and contribute to the stewardship program that you have going on year-round in your church. And then they can match how much time they can give to a need that we have within the stewardship committee's program. So these might be nice ways. Some of these prompts here on this slide might be really nice ways for you to engage more members that represent the diversity of your congregation. Anything else to share from any of the other project resource team members before we go to the next slide?
I do, and that's basically, you can't just wait for people to come to you. Right. You really have to go out and extend the invitation to individuals. It doesn't really to stand up in church and say, we're looking for people to serve on stewardship, because nobody wants to be the first to raise their hand. But if you've identified those people in your congregation, go to them individually and invite them.
I think that's a great point, Megan. Thank you. Yeah, when we put just a broadcast out, please let us know if you're interested. Our return responses are very low, but when we have specific people that are connected to someone else reaching out and asking very specifically and explaining why they're asking, why I'm asking you to be involved, that also really strengthens the connections that we have with one another as members of our congregation. So thank you for that. Next slide.
Well, I see we have a couple of hands raised. Do we want to go ahead and take those? I saw Bob O'Reilly was first.
Yes, thank you. Bob?
I don't know if you can hear me yet. I'm unmuted.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Love technology. A couple of things. Get involved. I think that's probably everybody's challenge, getting people involved with the stewardship, because mostly everybody interprets that as a money asking type of situation. They're not looking at the whole game of that. And I think the people who are on committees, who are involved with program, and how the financial side of things and how the participation of things affect what they do and how it affects the church. I think the time, if you want, to me, getting the younger people involved is going to create longevity within your parish. Agreed. The problem, you have a lot of parents who both work. Anytime they have when they get home is really with their children. Mm-hmm. And how do we structure their involvement in the program to their daily lives? How do we get creative and say, well, you can still do these things and give them a certain time period, or ask them what can they give and when, and help them get there? I don't know how else to. It's a big challenge with any parish, I'm sure. When people get involved, especially with people who are already involved and like being busy, it's tough to make this an important part, to make room for it from something else that maybe isn't as important. Make this mostly the important piece. I guess that's the sell, right? I don't know, and that's something that I'm having to see as a challenge down the road, even though I'm not involved as a chair of that committee. But I would like to see some ideas on how to make that happen. How do we show people it really either doesn't take as much time for these little pieces we're giving you, or it takes a lot of time. You gotta respect that. And I don't know how else to approach that issue with other people, to let them know, here, we're not here to, like, you get involved now, we're going to load up your desk, and that's sometimes that's what people think. They're hesitant in getting involved, because they figure they're going to be the chair of it eventually. So
I think that's a really great point.
Yeah, and what I'd like to say there, because we are getting some absolutely great questions, and a lot of it is, again, this kind of goes back to our our conversations about people stewardship, and how we're able to, again, take the time and the care to structure some of the things that we do, so we make it possible, we make it accessible for people, which means we have to understand their challenges. We have to be in contact with them. We have to talk with them, and we also have to understand their passions and what their gifts and talents are. So I'm going to recommend, again, I'm writing these things down as we're going, so that, I really do think that we could devote one entire workshop to just this kind of, these kinds of questions, because I'm hearing over and over again how important they are to people. And I know that we don't have time to address them all tonight. So, but, I just want to reinforce to all of you who have those questions that we are writing them down, and we will make time, in a future session to address them more in depth, because I do want to respect people's time tonight. So, and I saw Father William next.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I think that the outline given on the slides are fantastic. If you picked them, you can write a book. But it is not easy to follow if you have not done or gone through recruiting the stewardship. The word stewardship is intimidating. I don't know how when you say it or read it, and when you ask someone to be a member of the stewardship committee, the first thing is, I don't have time. I'm busy. I'm too committed to other things. I'm so sorry. And nowadays, there are so many people even who dodge to become members of the vestry. So you find struggling. But at our church, we have an easy way of recruiting you, whether you like it or not. Because every month, we recognize a parishioner of the month. And we tell what that person has done during the month. and you discover that the person has actually exercised the talent. And I do believe when this person is receiving the certificate and recognition of the congregation, people say, oh yes, he does that. He calls people, he checks on this, he does this, he reminds this, oh, he closes the doors, oh, he welcomes people. And that kind of opens the door for someone who says, oh, I don't have time. But someone says, if I can have time and yet I do this, why not you? That is one way of doing it. Another way that we do it is asking individuals just to tell their testimony. We're not asking you to tell people that you received Christ, you are born again, whatever it is. We're just asking you to tell the testimony about your connection with your church. You know, what does this church mean to you? And you cannot believe the testimonies that they tell. You say it, and then we write it in our News Beyond the Pews for other people who missed your testimony to read. And they discover that the church has done much to you. And so you see, by doing that, we are actually bringing you, by the time the stewardship chair asks you to serve on the chair or on the committee, you're going to say yes. But before, you think that maybe it is something else. And then again, we have made it an ongoing, so it is not, the word stewardship is no longer a vocabulary or a Hebrew or Greek. It has become part and parcel of the services that we render every day and every Sunday. So don't use big words when you are asking people to join the stewardship. Break it as low, as simple as people can understand. What helps me is I ask a question: where is God in my stewardship? Where is God? In the process of this, where is God? Because if you remove him, then the responsibility of our stewardship is zero. So once I discover that whatever I'm doing in my stewardship, I am actually giving back to what God has given me, then it doesn't bother me at all. That's my comment. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Father William.
And then Natalie, you want to go ahead?
So I think actually, to build upon Father William, you have to meet people where they are and break it down and give them something that encourages them to participate. So I think first you need to learn what drives them, what's their point of passion, what do they want to share. Then you need to make certain that you're listening well enough so that you can help them connect what they want to do with what you have, which then also means you actually have to learn to sort of lighten that a little bit, just because you might not want to hear that this individual can only commit 30 minutes a month, but what can you, and you want 30 hours a month, you know, type of thing. So how do you find a way to hear them and invite them in, recognize their talent, and give them something that they can be successful at? And then maybe let them come back to you later on and say, that was a wonderful experience. I enjoyed doing that. How do I do more of that? And then I think it ties into before Megan saying, like, you're not always going to get people to come to you. So sometimes also you need to acknowledge what you see them doing. Is there someone that cleans up after coffee hour? Oh my gosh, they're going to help you at your stewardship breakfast. Maybe we won't call it a stewardship breakfast, Reverend. We'll call it a summer breakfast. But you know, now you have another person with hands to lighten the load. Maybe you see someone who loves to, you know, welcome the families. Now you know you have someone who might be able to do a family service or say a few points about that ministry. Keep your ears open, listen, and learn how you can help them help you.
Thank you for that. And so one of the things, and I didn't mean to step on you there, Eva, but I, you know, just wanted to be aware of the time and be good stewards of everyone's time, realizing that we all anticipated that this was going to be about an hour-long session, but we've had so many great comments and questions and suggestions and ideas, that we still have, I would say probably, guessing if we move pretty quickly through the rest of the slides that we have, probably a good 15 or 20 minutes longer with the material that we have. But just to let everyone know, if you do have, time constraints, or if you're just zoomed out for the day, that we are recording this. We will be making the slide deck available. So if you have a need to leave at or around, Jamie just reminded me we anticipated 90 minutes. Okay, so my bad. I was just getting nervous because I thought it was going to be about an hour. So we should, I think at this point in time, we probably still will, maybe finish within that time frame anyway. But if we don't, once we get to the point where we're approaching 8:30, if you have a need to jump off, at that time, and we're not completely finished yet, just to please be aware that the recording will be available, the slide deck will be available, so that you'll, be able to access it if you do need to hop off. So with that, I will hand it back to you, Eva.
All right. So I heard a lot of concern about time commitments, about how do you approach people. I think goal setting may be helpful because you will be able to know what you're going to ask of your members and set out the kind of the path through the stewardship season. Up in the corner of this slide, you see this little quote: "Each of you must bring a gift in proportion to the way the Lord your God has blessed you." The sentence before that, and this comes from Deuteronomy chapter 16, the sentence before that is, "No one should appear before the Lord empty-handed." I don't know why we didn't include that verse as well, but each of us must bring in proportion to the way we have been blessed. So that little thing is up there just to get your attention. We have a series of questions here that I think are thoughtful questions for this particular time we find ourselves in, which is really a time of transition coming out of restrictions on physical gatherings and into what may be, for many of our congregations, a period of renewal as they look again at renewing their ministries, both the gatherings within their buildings, but also perhaps the outreach and ministries you were doing in your communities. So now is a time to be thinking about these sorts of questions. Think about, what is it that attracts you to the church? Everybody's going to have a slightly different answer, but can you answer that question yourself? Do you even know how the church is viewed locally? Many people don't know what their neighbors think of their church. And you'll be surprised to find that a number of your neighbors probably don't even know that you are a church on that block, depending on how impressive your building is. And then this is so important. Where are we now? How are we doing? In some of our congregations, there's been a lot of grief. Some of our congregations have suffered a good deal from the COVID-19 deaths and illnesses and long COVID. It has had an impact. And certainly our time physically distant from each other has changed the way we are now gathering as communities and learning to gather again. But how else has it changed your mission and your ministry? And then this box in the corner here, why are we conducting this campaign? And this could take you actually back to the slide that Father Bob spoke on, why stewardship? Is it all about just financial security? Isn't there an element of spiritual growth? Getting to know our members again and growing our membership, learning again what our local mission is, because it's changed in the last 2 years. What programs are relevant to us now? Youth? Older adults? Are there lost sheep? I have some lost sheep I've been out looking for. And what other reasons? You know, they say about goal setting, if you don't know where you are going, any road will get you there. And that is, we don't arrive anywhere in particular because we haven't got a destination. We haven't set goals. So goals are important. Next slide, please. Goals take us from transparency to trust. We want to be transparent, both with the people we recruit for the stewardship committee at your church. We want to be very clear to them about what we're hoping to accomplish, what we're expecting of them. And we want to develop transparency and trust with the congregation as well. When people in your congregation understand that you have goals, they understand what it is you are trying to achieve, and they will develop a sense of trust. So name those goals, publish those goals. You know, you don't light a lantern and stick it under a bushel basket. You put it on the lampstand where it gives light to the whole house, right? And don't give up. Just keep going, keep pursuing. Just do everything you can as you try to reach that goal. As you progress through the stewardship season and you come to that point in time where you're gathering the pledges, share progress. And then you get to the end of the year, if you're on kind of an annual in the fall sort of stewardship pledge campaign, and you hope to get in your commitments before the end of the year, share the progress with the congregation and with the vestry, of course, and then begin thanking your stewardship volunteers right away. Thank every person who has submitted a pledge card or made another commitment right away. Be intentional about it. Thank them again and again. Little notes from the priest, little notes from the rector, the wardens, the vestry, the stewardship chair, whoever it is who's going to take that responsibility. A handwritten note, if you can do it. These are really appreciated. So below, we have some examples of goals. You want 100% participation. That would be fantastic. It's a great goal. Sometimes you have to break it down into something a little more manageable. Maybe you can take 3 regular givers and convert them to pledgers. Maybe you can get 3 new pledges from new members or returning members you haven't seen in a while. Maybe you can shoot for growth in pledges that exceed losses from deaths and departures. And I think that in the coming year is going to be important to many of our congregations because they have felt that there was a drop off over time. And indeed, for many, there was. But above all, I think when we are talking about goals, we also want to set a goal of spiritual maturity. We want to encourage what Father Bob described as first fruits giving, as opposed to giving from what's left over after you've paid for everything else that month. We want to build a relationship with God. And we want to feel engaged that what we are doing is to sustain the mission and the ministry that God has entrusted to each of our congregations. Okay, next.
So picking up on what Mother Megan just said about goal setting, both the specific kind of numbers aspect of it, but then just as importantly, more importantly, the spiritual goal setting. What you see here are some of the campaign materials you might consider. And I want to take just a minute to talk about wow cards. I remember the first time that Father Bob talked about wow cards at when I attended a presentation on stewardship a few years ago, and I thought, what are wow cards? So what they are is asking others in the congregation to reflect on, pray about, If Jesus came to our church today, what would cause Jesus to say, wow, you're doing that? Or what might we want to do that would bring out that, wow, that's fantastic. So it's a way of visioning as you're setting goals. It's a way of looking forward, seeing where you are now and what's terrific about it, and seeing what kind of growth, what kind of spiritual growth, what kind of growth and service to the community your congregation might want to engage in. So the colors in this campaign materials, wow's at the start. That's kind of now, right? This is in the summer. This is as you're thinking about the focus, the theme, the goals for your campaign. The line in teal are then the materials that you'll be preparing over the course of the summer. The orange are implementation of the stewardship campaign, and there'll be a lot more about that in the sessions that we're going to be offering in August. And then the last two in purple are follow-up materials that after the campaign has more or less completed, where you'll continue to engage with people, to write thank yous, thank you, or to be back in touch. The Libunt, I spent a long time a year ago wondering what Libunt was last year, but not this year. So to those who have pledged in the past, but didn't pledge this year, and being in touch with them because, they just got busy, they forgot, or maybe their circumstances have changed. So that this is an overview, but we're going to focus next on the teal color in terms of case for support, introduction letters, request letters, and pledge cards. And next slide. Oops, poll. Sorry, poll. Which of these materials does your congregation typically use? So just take a moment to look at the list and check off the ones that you're using now.
I'm not seeing a poll.
Is there, I saw the poll on my screen. Is anybody, are others seeing the poll?
They must be, because they're participating.
Okay. I'm not sure why, unfortunately, I'm not sure why you're not seeing it.
If you go down, you should be able to see the poll at the bottom. There's a little icon that says poll. And if you click on that, you'll be able to refresh it.
I'm on an iPad, so it doesn't necessarily.
Okay, you've stumped me.
Sometimes on the iPads, they're up, that polls is up at the top instead of down at the bottom. You have to move your cursor, and then it'll drop down.
Yeah. Oh well. Poll.
Got it?
I got it.
So you can see that almost everybody is using a pledge card and forms, a request letter, reflections in the bulletin, stewardship homily, lay testimonials. Some are using a brochure. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And wow cards. A few congregations using wow cards, and then also some using the Libunt letters. So let's drill down a bit more on the brochure. Whoops, I'm sorry, not yet. Let's go. Can we go back to the slide that has the rows of teal and orange and purple? Yes, thank you. That one, because I want to pause for a moment and talk about online giving. And George, in fact, is going to speak about that. It's something that that some congregations may have used before COVID, but certainly many more since then. So George, could you talk about that, please? I think George is on.
There we go. I have access. Thank you. We've been using online giving for a number of years, thanks to Father Dave Snyder, who was our interim at the time. And he has us really firing away pretty well with it. So I'd just like to make a few points about the benefits of online giving. We have 27 people now who have taken advantage of this. And due to COVID, there's been a lot of declining in-person attendance and giving. So due to our online giving process, we've had a lot of recurring gifts, and those recurring gifts have actually carried us through the slow times. And it's been a really great help to us. Secondly, and this is, I'll keep it quick, online giving gives you security. There are security factors that you can actually improve on. Just as an example, just 3 weeks ago, a lot of people have been sending in checks to us through the mail, and we found out through video camera that we've had someone stealing our checks in our mail. No. So, because of the lack of in-person attendance, I guess the people just thought we just didn't cash them and we'd never see them. So instead, what happened was we found out very late that these checks have been stolen. And we recommended to them that they go online giving, and they jumped right on it. So for me, if you don't do online giving, if you don't have a program, I think our cost is like less than 1% of the company that actually is the vendor for this. So it's very reasonable, and it has really good benefits. So I really recommend it to everybody.
Who are you using, George, the company?
We use Vanco.
So I thought, yeah.
And again, their percentage, they have one aspect of it is there's a flat charge, I think, of 20 cents per transaction. And then there's like a 0.6% factor on whatever the whatever the contributions are. And it comes out to be less than 1%.
Yeah, that's great. And I see in the chat, Mother Megan just put up that began using online giving early in 2020, and it now makes up half of our monthly giving. That's really impressive.
It is, and it makes it possible for young people or younger people who don't carry checkbooks, don't like to use checks, to give regularly.
We found that to be true, Mother Megan, that young people have no cash and they have no checks. Right. So, if you can make the giving accessible to them, it's right in their wheelhouse.
And we also use Vanco. The platform is called Give Plus, and it's a service of Vanco.
And I suspect some on this Zoom session might want to know more about it, or might like to talk with either of you, George or Megan, about your experience and how they could pursue getting that set up.
Right. It's very smooth. It's very easy, and it's very secure. Just like I mentioned it's secure on both ends for everybody.
Oh, and Father Bob also put in a prior parish, we went to online giving within a few months, more than half of our pledge income came in online. So again, just reiterating what you said, George, helps stabilize income year round. Yes, because summers, right? Summers are the time when pledges fall off, and then people do catch up again, but it makes for a kind of a bumpy couple of months.
It smooths it right out, Tina. It makes it very smooth through the summer months.
Great. Thanks for that. And I know you'd be a good resource for anybody who wants to learn more about it.
Absolutely.
So let's then move on to.
I'm just also noticing in the chat, we have a couple of people who are looking for getting more info on online giving and looking for some pros and cons on the different online giving platforms. So just to let you all know that we have taken note of that, and we'll make sure that you get that information.
Okay, so building your case for support and it says brochure. Not everyone does a brochure. Certainly not everyone does a brochure every year. But I think an advantage of doing a brochure, at least sometimes, is it kind of brings the thinking together, right? It brings all the pieces together. So tell people why, invite them to name their why, call them to join in. And what I thought I would do, the next slide shows the St. David's brochure from last year, and just touch on those three pieces we saw in the preceding slide by walking you through the brochure. Now, this was a trifold, so the panels are out of order, but I'm going to just walk us very quickly through each panel to show how those three tell people why, ask them to participate, how that played out. So Water of Life was our theme. Again, I mentioned co-chair for next year, but she is the one who suggested that as the theme for it. She also did the beautiful red background palette graphic, which really came together in such a warm way in terms of the brochure. Right away, grounding it in scripture. So we almost always have a quote from scripture on the front panel. As you open the brochure, the next panel you would see is the one on the far left, stewardship. Again, why stewardship? All things come of thee, O Lord, and of thine own have we given thee. So it just answers that question of why stewardship right away. The next panel opening it would be where you see the three panels on the right. And the text there talks about where St. David's was at that moment. We had a new rector in Mother Annie Cornell. We were reflecting on what God's plan was for St. David's and for what future we would wish to carry out at St. David's. And so that's what the text talks about. So it's very much bringing it back to where we as a congregation were at that moment. One of the other committee members who wrote the text also felt very strongly about putting in bar graph to illustrate and I know you can't see this, read it very well, but the bar graph on the right with the big high blue column is what percent of the support for St. David's comes from pledges. That's the blue. So it just made it visually clear that yes, there's fundraising, and yes, there's other gifts, and yes, there's some rental income, but how important pledges are for the ongoing health of our congregation and for us to be able to carry out God's mission as we feel we can. So, and then the last panel is the middle one on the left-hand side. Thank you. So again, the first thank you. The first thank you is in the brochure, and many thank yous then to follow individually to people as they are making their pledges, and individually to volunteers, not necessarily on the stewardship committee, who gave testimonials, who helped with the celebratory coffee hour, and so forth. So that was our brochure last year. And there's many resources. Project Resource has many resources of brochures that have been collected from various parishes. If we can go to the next slide, I don't think Shirley is on. She was going to talk about St. Augustine's, and that's here, and that's in the presentation. I'm not going to speak about it, but just to again shows a different visual format for it. But I think that you can see the direction that the brochures are going. I'm sure many of you have put them together yourself, but it's a thoughtful process. It's a committee process. It really benefits so much from the conversations that the committee had as a group. And so I think just as I say, maybe you can't afford to do it every year, but doing one from time to time helps pull it all together.
And Tina, I know we do have Elizabeth White, who's also from St. Augustine's, with us, and I see she has her hand raised. So would you like to say something to that, Elizabeth?
I would just like to say thank you, and that this is the second brochure that we've had. We had one year before, and it was very well received by the congregation. And we have our committee is ongoing. They keep coming every year. We don't have to try to recruit new people every year. And you see, they did list the goals, where we've been, where we're going. We have testimonials and little pictures that show our activities and some of our outreach programs. It has been very effective for us. And Shirley is the chairperson of that committee, and she's doing a very good job. And a lot of it has come out of her participation with ECS before that. I think it's ECS. I'm getting them all mixed up. But she's also on this committee too. So she is taking the ideas that you give her and bringing them back to us. And we've been successful. In fact, we're having another meeting tomorrow. So we start early with the stewardship.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And just really quickly, Tina, maybe you could just, we have a couple quick questions in the chat. How did you get these into people's hands, and do you print them in-house or have them professionally done?
So we got them into people's hands in two ways. We were back in person in the fall, and so they were available at church, but also the brochure accompanied a letter that went at the start of the stewardship season. So there was a introductory letter talking about stewardship with the brochure enclosed. And then there was a second letter, which was asking people to pledge with the pledge return card enclosed. But so they were available through the mail, they were available in the church, and it didn't lend itself to a electronic presentation. So we didn't do that. I mean, we could have probably worked that out, but we didn't. And in terms of printing, yes, we did have it professionally printed. We actually, there's a printer local to St. David's that has done a number of jobs for us. So not sure it's that we get a special rate, but just does a good job and isn't terribly expensive.
Great. Thank you. Onward, Jamie.
This one's me. All right, we have a simple timeline for you. The week of October 9 is let everyone know what's coming. Let them read it at home, let them hear it, let them see it. Week 16, the week of October 16, the introduction letter, telling them why we're coming to them for support, and announce it again. Week of October 23rd is designated as the Stewardship Sunday. So we'll have lay testimonials, announcements again, let them know what it's all about. Events and coffee hours, if you're so prone to enjoying that. Our priest will give a stewardship homily, and we hand out the request letter with a pledge card. And then finally, on weeks of October 30th through November 20th, because we only get about 25% of our pledges up with the original day on the 23rd, we start counting them up and staying after them with additional letters and emails and announcements. That's what we do in Pittman. Absolutely give them thank you letters whenever you get one, because that's what it's all about. Celebration of commitments is a wonderful thing. And then follow up for all the bean counters like myself, where we keep track of all the data on spreadsheets and we report back because everybody always wants to know how we're doing.
And so, yeah, that's a suggested timeline, but it's certainly not hard and fast as far as the dates go. But we did identify October 23rd as Stewardship Sunday within the diocese. Here is the scripture reading from the alternate lectionary that you can use that speaks to elements of stewardship. So you can use this, you could use October 23rd as a launching point for your campaign, as a closing point, or it even can fall in the middle of your campaign to reinforce messaging that you have during your campaign. We just wanted to make sure you could earmark this date on your church calendar and keep it in mind as you begin your planning. Next slide. Thank you.
Father Bob?
Oh, hang on a second. There we go. Project Resource is here to support you and your ministry, ordained and lay, as you look at stewardship of all kinds in your congregation: stewardship of money, stewardship of people, annual giving, major gifts and capital campaigns, planned giving and wills. We can be a resource to you. Workshops like this, but we also have access to all kinds of curriculum, training materials, sample timelines, sample letters, and from a variety of curriculums. Examples of these are the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, which is an organization or branch of the Episcopal Church focused on this kind of material. Project Resource is a national movement from the College of Bishops and the Episcopal Church Foundation and others that many of us have been trained in some depth. And the Project Resource is a library of resources and a team of people who will work with your congregation through these workshops, but also one-on-one. And the book that's been popular over several years is called New Consecration Sunday, where it's a very prescriptive approach of how to get all this stuff organized and lay it out on a calendar and engage lots of people building up to Consecration Sunday, where everybody brings in their pledge cards at once. But the thing to remember is that we are stronger together. We together are the diocese and the church, and Project Resource is a team of people with access to printed material, experience, story sharing that you help us broker out to other people, and we will walk with you. So please keep in touch as you do this. We want to hear your stories and we want to support you. Thank you.
All right. And so at this point in time, I would like to just take a few minutes. And again, I am conscious of the fact that we are at 8:30. So if you do need to hop off, we totally understand that. Just to go through a few of the resources and literally take you on an online tour of how to navigate to get to them. And then we'll be ready to call it an evening. So what we have in front of us here is the Episcopal Network for Stewardship website. Very easy to find. It's just tens.org. And we will be, I did see a question in the chat before about the password. There is a password associated with some of the material in TENS, not all of it. And there is no longer a username. For those of you who are used to the old format with TENS, there's no longer a username, but they do still ask for a password. So we have a slide that has that password on it, and you'll see it in just a couple minutes. But they have the website broken down into different areas: annual pledge campaigns, a wonderful resource library, webinars and events, membership, which is probably not, of that much interest to all of you. But these three main ones here, the pledge campaigns, the resource library, the webinar and events. The important thing to remember is at the way that they've restructured all of this, the things in the resource library are accessible to you without a password. So all of these wonderful things that they have divided down into 4 different categories: stewardship, spirituality, information, pledge campaign tools, liturgical resources, and 10 topics and recommended materials. You can go into any of this, without a password. So here's one of our favorites, right? Why clergy should know what people pledge. That's so you can just click on this and you'll be taken there, no password necessary, okay? So same way with the webinars and events. You can come in here and you can navigate around to different webinars, recorded webinars and slide decks, and you don't have to have a password in order to get to any of that wonderful stuff. Where you do need a password is at the annual pledge campaigns, because these are the curated materials that that TENS prepares for each different annual, and they have a theme, obviously, for every campaign. So the 2022 theme is called More Than Enough. And I think I saw a post in the chat way earlier in the meeting from Mark McMahon when we were talking about some of the other activities, that they're going to do a fish taco, some kind of an event in conjunction with their More Than Enough campaign, which I thought was a wonderful idea. So, once you get into past this screen here, if you go in here and hit Learn More, you're going to hit this page where they're going to tell, and the wonderful thing also, I'm glad we're kind of looking at this, all of these resources are also in Spanish. So that's also just an amazing asset to have. Here's where you have to log in to be able to access and download the resources from TENS. And the it already has me able to do this because I logged in already earlier today. I was kind of hoping it would not remember that so I could show you how it works, but it'll just come up with a different screen, a different line that says password, and that's where you put the password in. The password is Luke 9:17, but you'll see that also on one of the slides that we have coming up. So that's just a real brief tour of TENS. And then also, in order to be able to access the project resources on our diocesan website, over here under what you need, you go down here to financial resources and click on it. Brings you to this page, and right up at the top left here, first thing, project resource stewardship, learn more. And that brings you to this page where we have, this was our latest stewardship news, where we had, this was our most recent keeping in touch with parishioners during COVID workshop. So yes, we did do some, already did a little bit of a dive into some of what we talked about earlier. There's a recording here that you can access. And then there's other resources that we have here from our prior workshops, or in some cases, things that congregations have shared with us. And then over here on the right side, you can see all of our, bookmarks for different other areas that you might want to go into. E-giving resources is one of them. And then, some of the other presentations that we've done. So that is how you get to project resource on our diocesan website. So those are, two of the, two of the areas that you can go to that are resource rich. I will also add to that Vanco has also wonderful resources for stewardship. So if you do use Vanco as your electronic giving platform, you'll also have access to the materials that they provide and the suggestions and the ideas. So they, that's another area that that some folks can access if they're with Vanco for electronic giving. And so at this point in time, again, I just being cognizant of the hour. We had originally planned that we would have some time for, sort of breakout discussion. I think you heard us say that at the very beginning. But from, it's been such a rich and wonderful conversation that we've been having all the way through this workshop. And we really, love that interactivity. So thank you all for your engagement with all of that. That what we would like to do is just take a couple of moments now with those of you who are left, and ask if you would type into the chat one takeaway that really stood out to you from this particular, session, that you're going to carry with you. It doesn't have to be all of, maybe there's more, but we're just looking for one. And then any way in which our project resource team can be of help to you moving forward. So we're just going to kind of take maybe a couple minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, and ask you to, type that into the chat so that we can, capture that and also capture how we can be of help to you as you move forward. So thank you. And just take a few minutes to do that. Great. I'm seeing a lot of wonderful stuff coming up in the chat. For those of you who are in the middle of typing, you just keep right on going and finish what your thoughts. And I'm going to hand it back to Eva if you have any last, closing comments, and then off to Bob for our closing prayer.
I think that these ideas are really going to help our team put together some communications where we're looking to send out perhaps 6 or so communications periodically through the next months, June, July, August, that address specific topics. So this is very helpful for us to identify what materials, and maybe there are certain video clips, but also references to different materials that would address some of these points. So thank you very much for sharing and taking the time to add in your comments here. I think it'll be very helpful to us. Father Bob?
As we go into our prayer, I'm bringing the stories that you've shared tonight into the prayer with me, and I hope you will too. I hear stories of hope, of questions, of frustration, but your ability to share that with us and each other tonight has been a form of prayer in itself. We're here to support you as you go forward, as you figure out first just one right next step for you and for your congregation personally and individually. And you can see some of the contact information on the screen. Let us pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
O God of unchangeable power and eternal light, look favorably on your whole church, that wonderful and sacred mystery, by the effectual working of your providence, carry out in tranquility the plan of salvation. Let the whole world see and know that things which were cast down are being raised up, and things which had grown old are being made new, and that all things are being brought to their perfection by him through whom all things were made, your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening, and thank you for being with us.
Keep in touch. We'll be here. Look for follow-up information too.